Hello, this is Mr. Vanscoy. In this lesson I'm going to discuss ecological succession, or secession. When I'm done, you'll be able to describe how communities change over time and describe how communities change after different types of disturbances. So in order to talk about secession, you need to know the two ideas of community and ecosystem. So let's review. A community includes all of the populations, plants or animals that live in an area. So this example here, we've got rabbits, coyotes, deer, grasses, and shrubs. Of course, these grasses and shrubs would be more specific, but those are all species, those are all populations. Let's see here. If you factor in the non-living, so those make up a community. So these all together make up communities. If you factor in the non-living parts of the environment and the interaction that those living things have with the non-living parts, then we're talking about ecosystems, so kind of this level here. So here's our populations. Our populations together make up this level here, the communities. All right, so now that we've got that, let's take a look at ecological succession. Ecological succession is the process in which an ecological community changes through time. These changes can include the types of species and also the number of species that are in a community. These changes can be the result of an aging ecosystem or different types of disturbances. So again, those changes can be the result of aging or maturing and disturbances. There are two types of secession. There's primary secession. This occurs in an area that has never been colonized. Okay, and kind of key determining things here is that it lacks soil. Okay, so no previous plant life. If there's no previous plant life, there's no animal life that's staying there, maybe passing through, but none that's living there. So again, one of the primary is that it's never been colonized, it lacks soil. Some examples, primary secession scenarios or examples include lava flows, sand dunes, rock left bare from retreating glaciers. These two photos here are of Mount St. Helens. These are not the same locations, just kind of a disclaimer, but I think you still get the idea. A major disturbance on the left when Mount St. Helens erupted more than 25 years ago now, leaving it covered in ash, mud flows, kind of wiping out the area. And then on the right, this is from 2005. Kind of after the fact, you can see that life has returned to this area. Again, other examples include those sand dunes and retreating rock. We'll actually take a look at some mission examples there too. There's also secondary secession. This is the more common secession. This occurs in a disturbed, formerly inhabited area. Soil remains, some or even most of the life might remain there. Some examples here include fires, tree removal by man or nature, astronomical, i.e. meteors and such, nuclear accidents, geohazards, such as volcanoes, earthquakes, landslides, tsunamis. There are a lot of different ways an ecosystem or community within an ecosystem could be disturbed. For example, sometimes it's just simply removing a few trees can be a big disturbance. So removing a few trees in a heavily wooded 2 acres, like my little 2 acres that I have, allowed for a lot of undergrowth to spring up. This allowed more sunlight and more nutrients to the other plant life in that area, not just the trees. Now that the undergrowth is growing up, you can see this undergrowth here, these younger trees springing up. that changes the habitat for the animals. So now I have deer. You can see some deer hiding out there in my yard in the middle of the day, just hiding out there because it's so thick. They're feeling protected. Okay, so they like those kind of habitats. And again, you can see this area over in this part is still fairly shaded, but you can see some of the sunshine and then the sunshine here on the ground that used to be all in the shade. And the only reason that this area here hasn't grown up is because I've been disturbing that area by keeping that part mowed down. Otherwise, you'd have all kinds of little trees and shrubs that are trying to grow up there just by taking out a few trees. Pioneer species are the first species to come in after a disturbance, and they have unique adaptations or advantages to help them out. For example, extra long roots for holding them in otherwise shifting sand dunes. The ability to withstand harsh temperature changes on the open sand. This then allows other plants to take root once they've kind of started to colonize that area, and over time topsoil can build up. This picture here is from the North Manitou Island along the shoreline. You can see some of these early grasses right on the front of that dune or shoreline taking root here. Disturbances can be human-caused or natural. They can also be big or small disturbances. They include natural or human-caused fires, nuclear disasters, that would be a human example, of course, tree removal, which again could be natural or human logging, volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. These are all just some different examples. Disturbances can also be biotic. For example, invasive or non-native or exotic species, all kind of talking about animals that don't normally live in an area. They can be introduced to an area and completely wipe out or outcompete the locals. And this may alter or even completely take over an area. For example, in Michigan we have issues with zebra mussels and Asian carp. So Asian carp are a series of highly invasive species capable of causing all kinds of damage to the ecosystem, changing up that Great Lakes food web, which then has potential effects on human health or even, or most certainly, economic changes as well, kind of that ripple effect. So invasive species, such a big topic, really we could discuss that all on its own. And certainly an issue here of concern in Michigan. So here's an example of fire disturbance and the secession afterwards from a boreal forest. This is actually 1 year after the fire, and then this is 2 years later. You can see that the plants are already starting to grow back in. This would be an example of a secondary secession. Okay, given time, nature can start to take back an area if it was disturbed by people, and then since then kind of left alone, nature can kind of come back through and retake that area. So here's an example of natural ecosystems taking back the North Manitou Island. So I could show these pictures of Chernobyl accidents and how nature's taken over, and Hollywood has lots of different zombie apocalypse scenes in their movies and whatnot, where you see the grasses that are growing up through parking lots and through cities. But again, here's one right from our own backyard in northern Michigan, the Manitou Islands. There was previously a settlement there that's now abandoned, and nature is now taking it over some 50 and 100 years later. In fact, there are places where entire farms are now covered by sand dunes, and you're literally walking on top of them, but you wouldn't even know it, except that there's a sign there telling you that there's a house buried under the sand dunes. In theory, if a community is left alone, secession will kind of take over, and the community will mature into what's called a climax community. Climax communities are, quote, the final or mature stage. This is what ecologists used to think, but they've really revised their viewpoint on this because there's always going to be disturbances. a climax or mature community does not always result in some sort of ancient mature forest area. Again, here is a local example along the Sleeping Bear Dunes in Michigan of a dune blowout. And you can see here how the removal of those of grass in that area has allowed the erosion to kick back in, and even small little disturbances can cause and turn into major erosion areas again. These are called blowouts. Let's see. Also a little, and again, sometimes these disturbances are little, but they get magnified, like, again, tree removal. Our final slide here is secession along North Manitou Island shoreline. There have been some important ecological studies that have been done along Lake Michigan on both sides. Famous ecologist Cowles from the University of Chicago did studies on the Indiana dunes along Lake Michigan, studying the vegetation and development on sand dunes. Again, here's a photo that I took from the North Manitou Islands from our inquiry backpacking trip. We looked at many facets of ecology there, including secession in nature, like this shoreline. So you can see this progression of, can't see it so well in this picture, but you've got bare soil, excuse me, bare sand down here, and then up here at this level you start seeing some of these specialized grasses that come in, and then as you start to move farther along, you'll see these trees and shrubs that start taking hold. And then not in this picture, you can go back even farther go farther back in, and you can see mature forests that have been there for years. But it all started off as a uncovered bare sand dune. So yeah, I would encourage you guys that are interested in science and find this stuff interesting to take those inquiry and research classes, and then you actually get to go out and do some of these really cool field studies. All right, well, I think that's going to do it for our discussion on ecology. If you have questions, be sure to ask. Thanks for listening.